folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Oh, well, it's a subject I haven't talked about in a while because, well, there's just craziness going on all around and it's hard to keep up. And we talk about homesteading and prepping and the New World Order and the government takeover and da-da-da-da-da. But we're still in a pandemic. And so we're going to talk about that today. And because YouTube does not like or really allow that, this video is not even going to be monetized. So instead, if you're interested, if you want to go over to My Patriot Supply, which is a company that I work with, they offer some of the best and lowest price, especially price per calorie, long-term food storage, food that you can buy in cans or sealed Mylar bags or buckets. They have it all there available, and they're really an excellent company. It started with just a family of preppers. I mean, that's really what they were, and it's grown quite a bit. So I will leave a link to it in the comments below. They also sell these Alexa Pure water filters, which are very similar and really almost identical to the big Berkey water filters, but they're about a third of the price. Right now they're $100 off. So if you want to click on the link below in the description, there's some really great buys over there to kind of help you get prepared even more with what's going on. So let's go back to this pandemic, and for whatever purposes, I will refer to it as that, and you can interpret that however you want. But let's officially call it what they say it is, a pandemic. This video, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world, how this is now affecting us, still affecting us, and it's also kind of a warning. Again, I don't want to be the sky is falling kind of guy, but we've seen what happened the first round over the last several months, and inevitably a second round is coming. And so while it's still somewhat low-key, you and I need to be doing everything we can to get prepared for it, because I have a feeling that the first round was more of a beta test to kind of see what they could get away with. And then once the second round hits, it's going to be a lot worse. So how do we know that there's a second round? Well, kind of how we knew that there was a first round coming. It did not hit the United States first. As you all know, it hit China, and then Europe and the Middle East, and then we were kind of the last ones that it really took hold, and the numbers started going up. And before I get going too much further, I know some of you don't even believe that there's a pandemic, and we know that it's all hyped up, and I get that. What we're talking about today is just kind of the official account of it, because in the reality is, when it comes to our personal freedoms, it doesn't really matter whether there's a real pandemic or not, or whether there even is a real virus. I do believe that there's a virus. It doesn't really matter if it is. It's what they are imposing on us is all that really matters. So it hit Europe pretty heavily, and then approximately 6 weeks or so later, 4 to 6 weeks later, we really started seeing the numbers start to trickle in and build up speed. And then, of course, there was this explosion here in the United States of cases. So fast forward to the present, and where does everything stand now? Well, as most of you know, the numbers here in the United States, especially in the big cities, have kind of hit a flat line. It does seem to be picking up in numbers in some of the rural areas, but of course not near the amount in the big population centers, because there just isn't the concentration of people. But let's look at what's happening overseas. In case some of you didn't know, because American media isn't really talking about it much, it appears that Europe is hitting their second wave. France, I believe it was yesterday, for the first time in the last 4 months or so, had 1,000 cases. Italy is getting almost more cases per day than they did back during the peak of the first wave. There's Spain. It's basically all of Europe. All the countries that we saw the first time around, they're all starting to have a little uptick in case numbers. So basically what it tells us is that it's about the time that Europe is hitting its second wave. And it's probably not at full steam yet, and I'm sure it hasn't peaked at all. But what we need to know is that if it's hitting there starting now, we have probably 6 to 8 weeks or less, and that's 6 to 8 weeks is being probably pretty liberal, before it starts really hitting here. Now, of course, there's an election coming up soon, so they could push this to happen before the election, whether the numbers are really there or not. Because, as you all know, there's a health issue going on, and then there's a political issue, and they're really two separate things. But of course, we are feeling the consequences of it. So we need to take this time to be aware. Hold on a second. Ooh, there we go. Take this time to be aware of what's going on overseas, and that inevitably the second wave is going to hit here, and we are going to feel that. So number one, we need to start getting ready for that. Everything that we saw happen in the first round, and a lot of my listeners live in rural areas, and a lot of the rural areas really weren't affected that much. For instance, here there were no government mandates of any sort in my area. There were some businesses, mostly big national chains, that has implemented face masks or limiting people. And I take that back. I'm sorry. There were some things that were mandated by government. Basically, the amount of people that could be in a building at any given time. That was pretty much the only thing. But on a local level here, there wasn't really much of anything done. There may have been things done on a state level or federal level, but here on a local level, we weren't really affected too much by it. And even now, there's still some national chain businesses that has their signs up that say face masks are mandated, but a lot of people just don't wear them. I mean, I just walk in and no one even says anything. But that's what we saw in like New York, and what we're still seeing in California and places like Nevada and Ohio, places where the crackdown was really harsh. Even in some conservative states, Texas, they cracked down pretty hard on them and a lot of businesses there. Again, I think that was probably a beta test. And I think for the average American person that isn't really connected, isn't really awoke and understanding what's going on, they saw the first wave and they got scared, and it was, we got to do what the government says. And then now it's kind of fizzling out. People are getting tired of it. You know how the American people are, they lose interest rapidly. Like it's if they're not getting stimulated by it, they just ignore it. They get tired of it. They get bored with it. So I think that most of the Americans are bored with it. There's been this focus on the protests and riots, and there's focus on the election. And so the average American right now, they're just kind of like, they're done with the pandemic. My goodness, when is this ever going to be over? And then the second wave's going to hit. And I predict they're going to show it being way worse than the first wave. That's somewhat typical with pandemics. Usually the second wave, not always, but usually the second wave is worse than the first wave. And so the second wave's going to hit because it has time to mutate, and it's mutated, but it's already in all of the population, and it's going to hit and it's going to explode. And because of that, because people thought it was over, because people thought it was kind of fizzled out, there's going to be a lot of panic in people. And all the initial panic buying that you saw back in March and April, it's going to be way worse this time. People are going to kind of freak out, and the economy has already taken a massive hit from this. So It's already like hanging by a thread, because back in March the economy was pretty solid. Now it's not. There's already, tens of millions of people without work. There's been, I read the other day that about 60% of the businesses that shut down because of the pandemic will never open again. 60%. That is a massive, massive number. Small businesses, mom and pop businesses are destroyed all across the country. And a lot of big companies too, more bankruptcies, everything. So this thing hits now under those conditions, under an already very weakened food supply system, under an already frazzled public because of the pandemic, and then the civil rights stuff, and then the rioting stuff, and then the nasty election cycle that's happening. It's going to be, the reaction, I believe, is going to be much worse than the initial one. This is what we need to be prepared for. Just to give you some ideas of some stuff that's happening, like in other countries right now. Probably a lot of you have heard this stuff going on in Australia, and that's kind of been the one that's been talked about in the news. People getting arrested because of the stuff that they're posting on Facebook. And we probably all of you have seen the videos. There's several of them going around of the police coming into someone's home with a warrant and putting them in handcuffs and hauling them off because of a anti-face mask fake post that they did on Facebook. And that is going on, not all over Australia, mostly in Victoria. But Australia is not the only country that's dealing with this level of draconian enforcement. In fact, it may not even be the country that's experiencing the worst right now. Scotland right now is the stuff that they are doing to the Scottish people is horrendous. And it blows my mind that a people that were once known very much like the Americans of being extremely rebellious and standing up against formidable odds against their government to rebel against them, have now become very, I don't know of a better word for it, but just neutered, I guess. And I'm sorry if that offends any Scottish listeners, because I'm very much Scottish also. You can kind of see it here. I have a lot of Scottish blood in me. In fact, I have family that still live over there. Distant, but they're still family. And the things that they're doing, they just recently renewed and added to some of the restrictions in Scotland. And now you can't go to anyone's house. You can't go visit family members. If you don't have a birthday party, all this kind of stuff, you can't do it. You can't be out on the street walking around. You can't be in little groups. And the police now have been given authority to go into these groups. If there's a party at your home or business or church or whatever, the police have the authority to go inside, break it up, and make arrests. The level of stuff that's going on in Scotland is quite awful. And it's going on in other places. There's in Spain, they're arresting people on the streets for not wearing face masks. There's a video of a young man with his mother. He looked to be about 12 or 13 years old, didn't have a face mask on. The police came and very, very aggressively put him to the ground and handcuffed him while the mother was screaming and crying, all because he wasn't wearing a face mask. We're seeing this kind of stuff happen, and for years, at least through most of my adult lifetime, those of us that have been more awake, we've talked about that the government could do this kind of stuff. The government wants to do this. This is what bad government leads to. This is what too much government power leads to. And we've talked about it, like it what if, or that it could happen. And we've used examples of Germany and Russia and these totalitarian regimes of history. And yet now it's happening right now. And people have become so complacent that they just they're overwhelmed with what's going on. They're burnt out. They've got this PTSD type of, just stress because of all the craziness that's happened. And now everyone's just, they don't have the energy really to fight anymore, I think, is a lot of the thing, or they don't even care. And we're seeing this kind of stuff happen. There's a video I posted on this channel and on Facebook, I believe. I'll have to check, but I think I did. of just in the last couple of days here in the United States. I believe it was in Utah. If I'm wrong, someone correct me, but I believe it was in Utah, of an outdoor church service type of thing. They were outside singing hymns and praying, and the local police came up and arrested some people, pulled them out while people were, raising their hands and praying. They pulled them out and arrested them because they weren't social distancing enough. That's what's happening here in America. There's been pastors and churches and individuals fined because they go to church. Businesses have been mandated to shut down. I mean, there are, and I know a lot of you don't agree, and I don't either agree with all the government handouts, but the fact is there are thousands and thousands of businesses all across the country that have been shut down, not because the owners wanted to do it or because they were losing money or because they were afraid of the virus, because the government themselves would not allow these people to stay in business. That is something, and it's not like they were doing some type of illegal type of business. These were legitimate, legally run and started businesses that the government has come in and shut down. I know we've talked about this in the past, but we've forgotten that how serious this is, how serious it is that we now live in a nation that we once bragged about and beat our chests and stood high, and saluted and put our hands over our heart because we were such a free nation. We were the freest in the world. And now people are going to jail because they're worshiping their God. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And that video that I posted isn't the only one. There's other places. There was one recently where a man was arrested. He was literally standing on a street corner in the city, reading out of the Bible. That's basically all he was doing. And he was arrested because he didn't have a face mask on when he was out in public. This kind of stuff is happening more and more. And unfortunately, so many of the people are terrified because of this pandemic virus. They're terrified that, we have to do this. We have to lose our liberty. We have to lose all these freedoms to protect us from it. And you and I know that once we give those up, once we hand that level of authority over to the government, we're not getting it back. They're not just going to say, okay, it's over now. Now you can go back and be as free as you once were. No, they're going to keep these this enforcement in place, because now, even if the virus mysteriously goes away, let's just say it happens, now they will have to continue to enforce this level, and maybe even worse, to prevent it from coming back or from another virus from happening, because now we're so terrified of these, little viruses that could kill, 0.5% of the population, that we have to now keep these regulations in place. Folks, the America that once existed back in January of this year no longer exists anymore. And a lot of people just have not realized that. So the main thing today is to take away from this is that we have to get ready. I know I talk about that in every video, and you're probably tired of it. Like, how much more ready can I get? Well, we just have to keep doing it, because the second wave is coming, folks. And I think that they proved their point during the first one, that they can get away with just about whatever they want. So if they don't push it before the election, I'm going to guess probably 6 weeks from now, we're going to be rolling in the second wave. So get yourself ready, and get your home ready and get your family ready, because I don't think they're going to let this one go by without taking every advantage of it that they can. All right, folks, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.